Last year, more than 167,000 pounds of ground beef were pulled from American stores in a single recall, after 15 people got sick. That's not the part that should worry you. The part that should worry you is that 4 companies now control roughly 85% of the beef in this country. In 1980, that number was 36, and 2 of those 4 aren't American companies at all. They're Brazilian. Right now, the United States Department of Justice is investigating all the 4 of them. The ground beef in your cart, the package wrapped in red, white, and blue, may have been packed by a company headquartered 5,000 miles away, under a label loophole the federal government only closed this January. We're going through 10 brands you need to look at twice, counting down from concerning to genuinely shocking, and finishing with the 3 that are still real American beef, raised by people whose names you can actually find. Let's get into it. Number 10. The store brand in the plain package. This is the one that fills the cart without a second thought. Great value at Walmart. The Kroger label. Kirkland at Costco. The one you grab because it's cheaper, it's always there, and beef is beef. That last part is the assumption worth stopping on. Here's what most shoppers never think about. Walmart doesn't own a single cattle ranch. Kroger doesn't run a slaughterhouse. Costco doesn't raise a single steer. What they own is a label and a purchase order. The beef inside that package is produced by whoever won the supply contract for that store, in that region, in that buying cycle, and that contract moves. The company grinding your beef this quarter may not be the company grinding it next quarter. The price gets renegotiated, the supplier changes, and the package on the shelf looks exactly the same the whole time. You can see the gap for yourself. Flip the package over and read it slowly. You're looking for one specific sentence: that the beef was born, raised, and processed in the United States. On most store-brand ground beef, that sentence isn't there. What you'll find instead is a distributor address and a weight. Distributed by. Packed for. That's not an accident of packaging. That's the exact amount of information they're required to give you, and not one word more. You saved $1. What you traded for it was knowing anything at all about where it came from. Number 9. The frozen patty. This is the summer staple. The box in the freezer aisle with a photo of a grill on the front. The one that turns a backyard cookout into a 15-minute job. For a lot of families, this is what a hamburger has always been. So read the front of the box carefully, because the wording was chosen for a reason. There's a legal difference between ground beef and beef patties, and the manufacturers know exactly what it is. Ground beef, by federal definition, is beef and nothing else. No water, no binders, no additives. The moment a company adds anything to that, they lose the right to call it ground beef. So they call it a beef patty instead. That one word change opens the door. Now the ingredient list can include water, added to increase the weight you're paying for, salt and phosphates to hold that water in, textured proteins and flavorings to make a cheaper grind taste like more than it is. Turn the box over and read the ingredient panel. Real beef has one line: beef. If your patties list 5, 6, 7 ingredients, you're not looking at a hamburger. You're looking at a formulation built around a photo of one. Number 8. The premium grind that legally isn't what you think. This is the tray that costs a little more and looks a little richer. Deeper red, marbled, sitting one shelf above the budget option, priced to signal that the extra $1 bought you something better. Here's what that $1 didn't buy you: a definition. Under federal rules, ground beef can be assembled from trimmings pulled off many different cuts, from many different animals, from more than one plant. A single 1-pound package can contain meat from dozens of head of cattle you'll never trace. That's legal. That's standard. And it's true of the premium tray just as much as the cheap one. There's a simple test at the stove. Put the beef in a dry, hot pan and watch what comes out of it before it browns. Beef that's been ground fresh from solid muscle releases its own fat and sears. Beef assembled from watery, low-grade trimmings does something different first. It leaks. A pool of thin, gray liquid gathers in the pan, and the meat steams in it instead of browning. That gray water is the difference between what the price implied and what the package actually held. The color of the meat sold you. The pan tells the truth. Number 7. The one wearing words that mean nothing. This is the brand that feels healthier the second you pick it up. All natural, no hormones added, farm-raised. The front of the package reads like a promise from a smaller, cleaner operation. Almost none of those words mean what a shopper thinks they mean. Natural, on a meat label, only means nothing artificial was added after slaughter, and the product was minimally processed. It says nothing about how the animal was raised, what it was fed, or where it lived. A steer from the largest industrial feedlot in the country qualifies as natural. No hormones added is the sharpest one. Read the fine print underneath it, and on an honest label, you'll find a line noting that federal regulations already prohibit hormones in raising hogs and poultry, and the phrasing games extend right across the meat case. The claim is printed to sound like a safeguard the brand chose. Often it's describing a rule everyone already follows. Farm-raised. All cattle are raised on a farm or a ranch. It's a word that means everything and therefore nothing. Here's the honest reading rule. On a food label, vague words are a marketing decision. Specific ones are a legal commitment. Natural costs the company nothing to print. Born, raised, and slaughtered in the United States is a sentence they can be held to. When a package leans on the first kind and avoids the second, the label is telling you which one they were willing to stand behind. Number 6. The additive that started a $2 billion lawsuit. For years, a product was mixed into a large share of the ground beef sold in American supermarkets, and almost no one buying it knew. It's called lean, finely textured beef. You may remember the nickname a news report gave it in 2012, one that stuck so hard it nearly ended in a courtroom bankruptcy. Here's the part that matters, stated carefully. This product is beef. It was approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture back in 2001. And when a television network built a series around that nickname, the manufacturer sued for $1.9 billion, a figure that, under that state's law, could have climbed toward $5.7 billion. The network settled. Its parent company later disclosed it had absorbed $177 million in costs tied to the case. So this is not a story about a product being poison. It's a story about something else entirely. As of that 2012 reporting, this additive was present in an estimated 70% of the ground beef on supermarket shelves, and it was not disclosed on the label. Prepared with ammonia gas, the same product is banned for human consumption in the European Union and in Canada. Not because a jury proved it dangerous, because those governments made a different call about what belongs in a package and what has to be told to the person buying it. That's the real issue in this whole aisle. Not always what's in the beef. Often what nobody was required to tell you was in the beef. If this is already changing how you read the meat case, you're about halfway through, and the next 4 brands are where it stops being about ingredients and starts being about who's actually in control. Number 5. The flag on the label that the government just had to defend by law. This is the package that looks the most American on the shelf. The stars and stripes in the corner. The words "Product of USA," the one a shopper reaches for specifically to support American ranchers. Until this year, that label could be a lie, and it was completely legal. Here's how it worked. Under the old rule, beef could be born in another country, raised in another country, and slaughtered in another country, then shipped to the United States, repackaged here, and stamped "Product of USA." The only thing that had to happen on American soil was the packaging. Cattle from overseas, wearing an American flag, sold to people who paid extra believing they were backing a rancher in their own state. This was documented for years. And in March of 2024, the U.S. Department of Agriculture finalized a new rule to close it. The "Product of USA" claim can now only be used when the animal was born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. The rule took effect in 2024, with full labeling compliance required as of January 1st of this year. Read that timeline again. The claim was so misleading that the federal government had to write a rule forcing the words "Product of USA" to actually mean "Product of USA." So, here's your test at the shelf. Don't trust the flag. Trust the sentence. Look for "born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States." If a package still shows you a flag but avoids that exact language, it's showing you a decoration, not an origin. Number 4. The one that ends up on a government recall list. This is any of the big processors' beef, and the reason it lands at number 4 is a pattern you can pull up yourself in a public database. In November of 2024, One Detroit company recalled over 167,000 pounds of ground beef for possible E. coli contamination, after at least 15 people had already gotten sick. 6 months earlier, a plant in Pennsylvania recalled more than 16,000 pounds for the same reason. And late last year, even a grass-fed brand marketed as the clean choice went onto the recall list. Now, here's the honest part. Because this channel doesn't do cheap fear. A recall is the system working. It means a contaminated lot got caught. That's a good thing. The problem isn't that recalls happen. The problem is scale. When 4 companies grind the majority of the nation's beef in a small number of enormous plants, a single mistake doesn't stay small. One contaminated production run gets blended, boxed, and shipped across a dozen states before anyone tests it. 6 figures of poundage, 15 states, from one afternoon at one facility. You can check your own package against this. Every federally inspected plant has an establishment number, an EST followed by digits, printed on the packaging. When a recall is announced, that's the number the government publishes. The centralized system that makes your beef cheap is the same system that turns one bad batch into a nationwide event. Number 3, the price you paid was decided in a room you weren't in. This is the brand that competes for your dollar, or appears to. For years, the largest beef packers ran advertisements against each other, stocked competing labels, and presented themselves as rivals fighting for your business. Cattle ranchers and beef buyers told a federal court a different story. In ongoing antitrust litigation, they have alleged that the 4 largest beef packers coordinated, beginning around 2015, to restrain how much cattle they bought and slaughtered, which pushed down the price paid to ranchers while pushing up the price you pay at the register. The companies deny it. The cases are still moving through the courts. But it isn't only ranchers making the claim anymore. Late last year, the U.S. Department of Justice opened an investigation into the Big 4 packers for possible collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation. A senior Justice Department official stated plainly that 4 processors control over 85% of beef processing, that 2 of them are primarily foreign-owned, and that the structure of the market itself points toward anti-competitive behavior. So consider what that means at the meat counter. The competition you thought you were choosing between may be far narrower than the shelf suggests. Different labels, different logos, a much smaller number of hands behind them, and a federal investigation now asking whether the price was ever really yours to negotiate. Number 2, the biggest name in your meat case that you've never heard of. Ask most Americans to name a beef company and they'll say a brand from a television ad. Almost no one says National Beef. Almost no one says Marfrig. That's not because they're small. It's because they're built to stay invisible. National Beef is one of the 4 companies at the top of this entire industry, and National Beef is majority owned by Marfrig, a corporation based in Brazil. You won't see either name on most of the packages they stand behind. Their beef flows into store brands, into food service supply, into labels that carry a grocery chain's name on the front and reveal nothing about who ground the meat. A shopper can buy this company's beef for years in an American store, often American-looking label, and never once encounter the fact that the sourcing decisions were made by a company headquartered in another hemisphere. There's nothing illegal about a foreign company owning an American processor. That's not the point. The point is the disappearing act. When the second most important fact about your food, who actually controls it, is the one fact deliberately kept off the label, that's a choice. The name got smaller so the flag could get bigger. And most people counting on American beef have no idea one of the biggest suppliers answers to a boardroom in São Paulo. Number 1, the company that pleaded guilty in an American courtroom. This is the one that has to sit at the top, and not because of a lab result or a texture test, because of a signed federal plea agreement. JBS is the largest meat company on earth. Its American arm, JBS USA, is one of the biggest producers of beef in this country. When you buy certain well-known grocery labels, the Swift name among them, you're buying JBS. And JBS is controlled out of Brazil by an investment company called J&F, owned by 2 brothers, the Batistas. Here is the public record. In 2017, that parent company agreed to pay Brazilian authorities the equivalent of $3.2 billion to settle a corruption case, one of the largest such penalties in the world. Then it came here. In October of 2020, J&F pleaded guilty in United States federal court to conspiracy to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and agreed to a criminal penalty of over $256 million paid to the American government. Prosecutors laid out how the company had paid roughly $177 million in bribes to foreign officials, and how that bribery helped finance its expansion into the American meat industry in the first place. Read that plainly. A company bribed its way to the money it used to buy up American beef production, then admitted it, under oath, in a courtroom in New York. This isn't an allegation. It isn't a lawsuit still being argued. It's a guilty plea on the record to the government of the United States. And today, that same company grinds a large share of the beef sold under American flags in American stores. You've been trusting the package. The package never mentioned any of this. Now, those are the 10 to look at twice. Here are the 3 that are still exactly what they say they are. These aren't consolation picks. They're the ones raised by people who put their own name on the beef. I source it from a place you can point to on a map and tell you the whole truth on the label because the whole truth is the product. Best option number 3, your local butcher or beef bought straight from the farm. Start with the option that's been quietly sitting in your own town the entire time. A real butcher shop or a rancher selling directly can tell you something no national brand on the avoid list can. The name of the farm your beef came from. Often the name of the ranch, sometimes the single animal. When you buy a share of beef directly from a farm, the entire supply chain collapses down to one honest line. One animal, one farm, one processor, into your freezer. No blending from dozens of unknown cattle. No contract that rotates suppliers behind an unchanged label. No São Paulo boardroom. It costs more per pound than the shrink-wrapped tray. And it asks something of you. You have to find the shop, or place the order, or split a share with a neighbor. That inconvenience is real. It's also the exact thing that industrial beef removed, and the exact thing worth getting back. Best option number 2. Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed. If you want a brand you can find in a grocery store without giving up traceability, this is a strong one. Thousand Hills is built around one clear commitment. Cattle raised on grass, on American land, for their whole lives, not finished in a feedlot for the last stretch. The company works with a network of family farms and is transparent about that model rather than hiding behind a distributor address. The label does the thing the avoid list refuses to do. It makes a specific, checkable claim about how the animal actually lived and stakes the brand on it. That's the difference between a marketing word and a standard. Grass, land, whole life, those you can hold them to. It costs more than the store brand. It isn't in every single supermarket. Both of those are true, and both are the natural result of raising cattle the slower, harder way. Best option number 1. White Oak Pastures. If there's a single brand that stands as the opposite of everything on this list, it's this one. White Oak Pastures is a family farm in Bluffton, Georgia, that has been in the same family since the 1860s. It isn't a label owned by a multinational. It isn't a heritage name that got bought and hollowed out. The family that owns it lives on the land the cattle are raised on and raises those cattle from birth to processing on that same ground. That's the whole thing you've been looking for through this entire list. Born, raised, and processed in one place in the United States by people whose name is on the sign at the front gate and on the package in your hand. There's no disappearing act here. No foreign parent company kept off the label. No contract rotating to a cheaper supplier next quarter. No flag standing in for an origin the company won't name. The accountability is structural because the people making the decisions are the same people whose family name has been attached to that farm for over 150 years. It costs more than every brand on the avoid list. You may have to order it or find the one grocer in your area that carries it. That cost and that effort are the price of a supply chain that begins and ends with people you can actually find. If you can get it, it's worth it. So, 10 brands to look at twice, and 3 raised by people who tell you the truth. Before you close this, here's the one rule that replaces all of it. Flip the package over and look for one sentence. Born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. If it's there, in those words, the company made a claim it can be held to. If it's missing, if all you get is a flag, a distributor address, and a weight, then you don't actually know where that beef came from, and the packaging was designed so you wouldn't ask. You chose beef because the logic was sound. It's real protein. It's the center of a Sunday dinner in every cookout you've ever hosted. For most of your life, a hamburger was one of the simplest, most honest things in the American kitchen. That logic still holds. It only holds when what's inside the package matches what's printed on the outside. 4 companies now control most of it. 2 of them answer to another country. One of them pleaded guilty in an American courtroom. And the flag on the label was so unreliable, the government had to pass a rule forcing it to mean something. Now you know how to see through it. If this changed the way you look at the meat case, the most useful thing you can do is pass it to someone who's still buying these brands on trust, the way all of us were, until somebody finally turned the package over.